Making headlines tonight, more than 2,000 positive COVID-19 people in isolation facilities and at home. The historic UNCTAD XV culminates with commitments to improve global trade. The Barbados Light Power Company seeking a rate increase. And coming up in sports, KKR all but qualify for the IPL playoffs.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC NewsNight, starting now.
I'm Shane Jones, leading the news at 7. There are over 2,000 active cases of COVID-19 in Barbados currently. This revelation from Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Anton Best during a media conference this morning, which was convened by COVID-19 Public Advisor David Ellis. Dr. Best says in addition to the over 800 people in isolation facilities, 1,486 are currently isolating at home. He has described the COVID-19 situation in Barbados as dire. Dr. Best says in August, Barbados recorded 689 new cases. However, in September, the figure jumped by around 500%, with 3,500 new cases recorded in that month.
Over the last few weeks, we've had a very high incidence or rate of cases of COVID. And if you could permit me, I just want to put some perspective on it. If you look at the rate of cases in August, or the total number of cases in August of this year, we had 689 cases. In September, we had 3,500 cases of COVID detected. That's a 500% increase in the number of cases. And so far, for October, we've had over 1,000 cases. So we've already surpassed the total tally for the month of August.
Consultant Manager for Home Quarantine, Dr. Adana Grandison, said there have been 122 people who were on green and turned to red transported so far, with others awaiting transfer to the isolation facilities.
Those are persons who are red or persons who are yellow at this point in time and are actively going into facility. We also had, at the point in time after making that first contact, we've had identified 37 persons by the time we got the first contact who had already been transported. So they were, at the point of first contact, we understood that they were already within an isolation facility. So we have quite a number of persons who have already been transported to that facility to be formally assessed. They're either kept within that facility because the health provider team down there has identified these persons as being very severe and they require closer monitoring.
The COVID-19 death toll now stands at 88 after 2 more people succumbed to the viral illness early this morning. A 78-year-old woman died after spending 3 days in primary isolation at the Harrison Point Isolation Facility. She had pre-existing conditions and was unvaccinated. Additionally, a 36-year-old man passed away while in primary isolation at Harrison Point, where he spent 19 days. He was unvaccinated. Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, has extended condolences to the loved ones of the deceased. As Barbadians ponder a post-COVID-19 future, they're being told the only way out is through vaccination. Principal of the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill, Professor Clive Landis, offered the advice on Q100.7 FM's Let's Talk About It radio show as focus was placed on the way forward for Barbados. He says countries can live with the virus as long as most people are vaccinated.
You only have to look at the TV. You know, when you're watching sort of Arsenal against Tottenham or something, you can see the whole crowd, they're all there without masks, they're all shouting and having a great time. And you know, this is what I think people have to picture as the way out. The way out of this is through vaccination. And of course, New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, she admitted basically that the elimination strategy can't work. And they've now officially abandoned it. And so has Australia. They've now reopened as well. And they now, too, are pursuing vaccination hell for leather.
Dentist Dr. Vidya Armagon of Caribbean Smile Makers believes several strategies need to be employed, including vaccination.
Because we're such a small island state. And there are ways to restrict that access. So in other words, make us healthy internally and look and see who's coming in. That's one strategy, but a marriage of strategies is really the way forward. And certainly the protocols need to be looked at. We need to look at our internal behavior, and absolutely, without a doubt, we need to get vaccinated.
This is historic hosting of UNCTAD 15 culminated today with the adoption of the Bridgetown Covenant and the spirit of Speightstown. Joining us for more on the final day of this major conference is our very own Ryan Broom. Ryan, good evening.
Good evening, Shane. Well, yes, as you mentioned, the Bridgetown Covenant and the spirit of Speightstown were two major elements of today's event. Their importance, particularly at this time, was stressed by the leaders, including Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley. Our Aaliyah Briggs has the details in this report.
If there are no objections, let us now so do. The Bridgetown Covenant is now formally adopted by UNCTAD 15 conference.
5 days of intense discussions and negotiations culminated with the political declaration of UNCTAD 15 and the adoption of the Bridgetown Covenant. The political declaration of UNCTAD, the spirit of Speightstown, was introduced by Minister Sandra Husbands.
The spirit of Speightstown seeks to capture the main challenges impacting our family of nations and their development aspirations, but particularly those amongst us that are most vulnerable. Building on the theme from inequality and vulnerability to prosperity for all, the spirit of Speightstown declares our vision for achieving the transformations necessary to build resilience and to achieve our coveted sustainable development agenda.
In spite of numerous delays to the conference triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Bridgetown Covenant was formally finalized and implemented. This document will guide the work of UNCTAD over the next 3 years. Prime Minister of Barbados and President of UNCTAD, Mia Amor-Motley, says this document allows UNCTAD to be a voice for developing countries seeking to advance in trade and development.
UNCTAD must keep close to its original purpose, that it must be the voice of developing countries as we seek to deal with issues of trade and development, and to create that platform that ultimately will lead from inequality and vulnerability to prosperity.
Experts, ambassadors, and officials were all involved in the negotiations, which helped develop the document that is expected to inform policies in the areas of trade, food security, digitization, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Aaliyah Briggs, CBC News.
And Shane, as you know, there were several sessions today and a final media conference this afternoon. Now, during that interaction with the media, Prime Minister Motley expressed her optimism about action being taken on many of the issues related to trade and climate change within the next 3 years. She said great progress was also made on issues such as trade logistics, investment, and the creative industry.
I would have put on the table today and yesterday a number of key things. One, that most of the trade in the world today is not in fact through airports and seaports, but through the internet port. And what we've seen effectively is the privatization of trade, and perhaps the greatest privatization in trade in the modern world. And there's a private oligopoly that literally is controlling this, but there are no rules, there are no regulations. So just as the G20 countries are trying to deal with them by way of taxation, the reality is that we need to ensure that there's fairness and that persons controlling the algorithms are not doing things that you and I don't understand and don't know what the consequences will be.
Now, earlier in the morning was the UNCTAD Ministerial Roundtable, and there the point was reinforced that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the existing vulnerabilities of developing economies, especially in small island developing states, laying bare their limited capacity to respond and adjust. Now, with that in mind, world leaders, including Jamaica's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Kamina Johnson-Smith, explored ways to support productive transformation for greater resilience in a post-pandemic world. Now, she revealed that, like many developing countries, the COVID-19 pandemic has hindered Jamaica's progress towards achieving sustainable development goals by 2030.
From a development perspective, the crisis has threatened our planned trajectory towards the achievement of critical SDGs. In our context, Vision 2030 aims to rebuild stronger economies in a more sustainable and inclusive manner. And this can only be implemented through mutually supportive and integrated policies across the economic, social, and environmental sectors, and in some cases, across governments. Policy coherence can stimulate and facilitate the striking of a balance between short-term economic growth objectives and our longer-term sustainability and resilience goals.
So Shane, there you have it, the successful UNCTAD 15 hosted by Barbados, and of course a lot of things expected over the next 3 years in terms of implementation. It's back to you, Shane.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. Well, we'll take a short break here, and when we come back, Barbadians will pay more for electricity if the Barbados Light Power Company gets its way. We'll tell you about that story. The Barbados Light Power Company has filed an application with the Fair Trading Commission for a review of electricity rates. The utility is seeking an 11.9% increase in rates, which have been in place since 2010. Shrika Griffith tells us more.
The company says while it has been able to defer a request for a general rate review through careful cost management and process innovations, the significant increase in costs and necessary investments, like the 33-megawatt clean energy bridge plant at Trent St. Lucie, has compelled it to seek an adjustment in electricity prices. It says the expenditures are needed to maintain a safe, reliable and resilient electricity service. However, acknowledging the economic challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, the company says it has designed rates to contain the impact to customers' bills. It is therefore proposing that increases should be no more than $6 for those customers using less than 150 kilowatt hours in a month. These customers account for 35% of the domestic service tariff group, assumed to consist mostly of low-income customers. The typical bill increase resulting from the proposed rates is estimated to range from 5 to 20%, depending on the applicable tariff. Light and Power says an estimated 10% reduction in fuel costs, anticipated from the commissioning of the Clean Energy Bridge by the end of the year, is expected to substantially mitigate the impact of the proposed increase in rates even further. Sharika Griffith, CBC News.
Thanks, Sharika. As Barbados embraces the online learning environment, it is working to ensure no student is left behind. Training in digital education is being offered to teachers, which Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training Santia Bradshaw says caters to individual differences and various learning styles. She notes that challenging teachers to be more digitally aware and strengthening their technological competencies not only assists them, but also benefits students.
Not only as 21st century educators, but allows them to better equip our students with the skills and the capabilities they too will need to navigate this new world. A thriving world on exciting technologies like robotics, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence, amongst others. To this end, at the Ministry of Education, our coding and robotics program across our nursery, primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions is today representative of a pivotal component of curricular reimagination. This will be followed by other reform initiatives to be rolled out as our Education Reform Unit continues to spearhead various system-wide reforms.
Minister Bradshaw was at the time addressing the launch of Education Month, which began with a church service at the Harvest Bible Chapel. The month is being observed under the theme Education Reimagined, exploring new frontiers for teaching, learning and national development in the 21st century. Barbadian author and educator Dr. Yvonne Weeks has amalgamated her years as a cultural practitioner and invaluable knowledge of the arts to produce a groundbreaking resource for theatre arts students. The UWI Cave Hill campus lecturer has produced the book Voices, Monologues and Plays for Caribbean Actors. It offers students across the Caribbean and the world insight into the history of the region and what sets it apart from the rest of the world. Dr. Weeks said the book was long in coming since there was a lack of current, authentic Caribbean teaching resources.
In early 2015, one of my theatre graduates, I'll call his name because I know he's watching, Dwayne Hines, he came to my office and he said he needed a monologue to prepare for the folk concert that the NCF was hosting because he had to do an audition. So I gave him a book. It was an American text. And then he returned it and he said, nah, boy, I need something more Caribbean, Dr. Weeks. Yvonne Weeks, he called me actually, right. That same week, I was talking to my cousin, who was a lecturer in theatre at the University of the Virgin Islands, and David Edgecombe, and he was lamenting that we're not writing, we're still very much depending on a lot of the work from the past.
Funded by the National Cultural Foundation, the publication is interactive with links to videos of live on-stage performances. It also contains over 70 questions to assist teachers with analyzing the texts. NCF Marketing Officer Ashley Dell said the foundation did not hesitate to get on board.
It is a fact that the arts are products of not only creative imagination, but that of documented Caribbean stories, which are fundamental to understanding our society today. Therefore, attention must be paid to creating the appropriate tools so that students have easy access to methodological devices that allow them the adequate resources needed to complete their studies. And hopefully in the projected future, they will take what they've learned and positively contribute to our Caribbean society.
The Business Report is brought to you by Sky Mall, serving you to make your shopping experience pleasurable.
Business news now. A direct air link between Kenya and Barbados is now a reality. An air services agreement was one of 3 signed yesterday between Kenya and Barbados. It was among the high points of UNCTAD 15. Trevor Thorpe has the story.
It's a bridge that will link us to the east. That's a statement from Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Motley at the signing ceremony of agreements between Kenya and Barbados at Hilton, Barbados. In a wide-ranging address for the occasion, attended by a cross-section of representatives from Kenyan businesses, the Prime Minister said the event was seeking to reverse centuries of separation, and now is the time to act.
I'm confident that other brothers and sisters of Caribbean governments will join us soon. And therefore, I look forward to us being able to complete that process, because the absence of air transport and maritime transport directly between Africa and the Caribbean must be a historic omission that we have a solemn and moral obligation to correct.
3 agreements were signed, and Ms. Motley said Barbados and the Caribbean needed a voice in the global south of the United Nations, and this event was bringing that to fruition.
If we do not seize the moment as we are trying to do now, then we will forever be victims of a time and a power over which we have no control. The time being history, and the power being others who have other interests that are not the same as ours.
The Kenyan president said he's looking forward to sharing experiences and the building of opportunities beneficial to both countries.
But I am very excited about the partnership that we've been having, especially in the digital world. We are hoping that what we have learned and the experiences that we have gone through, we can be able to share with yourselves, and also as a result open new possibilities, new outlets, new ways of doing business between ourselves in a much more direct fashion.
The agreements signed are more than just a call for biodiversity, but instruments that will see the 2 countries working together. And the Kenyan leader said the initiatives would also open new outlets and new ways of doing business between Kenya and Barbados. Trevor Thorpe, CBC News.
And this just in, Barbados has recorded 259 new COVID-19 cases, 259. These results are from 2,165 tests conducted by the Best of Santos Public Health Lab and comprise 129 males and 130 females. 65 people are under the age of 18. 647 people are in isolation facilities, and 1,491 are in home isolation. 140,159 persons have had the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, and 40.5% of the population have been fully vaccinated. Okay, we're going to head back on over to the sports studio and say good evening to Damien Best. What do you have for us in the second half, Damien?
Yeah, continue on with this one, Shane. Local basketball was thrown a lifeline by the COVID-19 monitoring unit, but the recent spike in cases cut short its long-awaited return. This was revealed today by President of the Barbados Amateur Basketball Association, Francis Williams, during a virtual media conference. There has been no basketball season since the COVID-19 outbreak in early 2020, and Williams said conditional approval for activities to resume was granted, with particular focus on getting a Barbados team ready for the FIBA 3-on-3 AmeriCup basketball tournament in Miami. That was scheduled for November 12th to 14th.
What we decided to do was to limit that request to a couple of areas, those being the national team training, instructional camps, primarily for the juniors, and 3-on-3 tournaments. However, any joy that we had from that response from the COVID unit was short-lived, as maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, we had a spike in cases, as you guys would be all well aware of, and then there was a subsequent ban on all contact sports. With that change of events, what the executive was then forced to make a decision to withdraw our national teams from the upcoming FIBA 3x3 AmeriCup. And this was scheduled to be held in Miami from November 12th to 14th. And this would have been the first time that there was regional competition for senior players at the national level. To be a bit more specific in how the directive affected our participation in this event, in order to take place in the Miami event, we were required to hold a local tournament where the players can earn their individual ranking points. And then from this group of players is where we would have selected the national team.
Williams also painted a grim picture for the future of the sport if the COVID-19 situation doesn't improve on the island.
In my mind, what happens next will be nothing like what we had before. I anticipate that we will lose players at all levels. I anticipate that we will lose referees, desk officials at all levels. I anticipate clubs and teams will lose sponsorship at all levels. And I can't see how, even given clearance today, how next year will look anything similar to what we had previously. I am pretty much making up my mind that at whatever point we restart, we will be pretty much doing a complete reset. And I'm not speaking only basketball, I think sport in general.
Before I go, let me remind you to continue following TV8, and you can get more news on our social media platforms, Instagram at CBC News Barbados and Facebook at cbcnews.bb, as well as our radio stations 94.7, 100.7 and 98.1. That's our news. Good night and be good.